So today, the weak and unpopular conservative Supreme Court surrendered some key powers from the judicial branch over to King Donald and the executive branch. I'm going to get into all of that with a lot of smart people and what it all means in just a moment. But first, I want to take a little bit of a step back and look at why the Supreme Court found itself on the road to enabling Trump's MAGA agenda in the first place. I mean, how'd they even get here? And the latest Quinnipiac poll, believe it or not, released just yesterday, is a pretty good starting point. Because Trump's policies are widely unpopular, and I mean across the board. Just take immigration. That was once his strength. Now, today, yesterday, the American public disapproves of Trump's actions by a 16-point margin. You can see it on the screen. On deportation specifically, which he's done a whole lot of, the American public disapproves of Trump's actions by a 20-point margin. On his decision to send the National Guard into Los Angeles, he's underwater by 12 points. And on his decision to send the U.S. Marines into L.A., it's even worse. The American public disapproves of that by a 23-point margin. And it keeps going on. I'll give you a few more. On the economy, Trump is underwater by 17 points. Goes the same for trade. He's underwater there by 17 points, too. So my point is this. Every single part of Donald Trump's agenda is deeply unpopular. And yet, he's barreled ahead with it anyway, thanks in large part to his absolute obsession with executive orders. Now, I'm not suggesting he's the first president to use them. He's not at all. But often the reason a president turns to executive orders, especially once they get past the first couple of weeks of their term, is because they've calculated that they can't get Congress to pass their policies into law. And sure, I mean, even with the MAGA lemmings in the Republican House and Senate, maybe that is a factor with some of Trump's agenda, maybe. That is not entirely why Trump uses executive orders. That's not his motivation. He uses them because he has no interest in building consensus, no interest in forming coalitions, no real interest in winning people over beyond the MAGA core base. I mean, he really hasn't even tried to push the bulk of his agenda through Congress at all, aside from the big ugly bill.
Stephen Miller might be the single most morally reprehensible member of Donald Trump's administration, which is why it is so much sweeter when we get to see him Meltdown live on air, which is exactly what just happened on Fox after Stephen Miller was hit with a legal bombshell courtesy of Congressman Robert Garcia. We are going to get into it all and what it means for Stephen Miller's disgusting and illegal ICE raids. But before we do, I think we have to start with the person who's been most vocal in calling them out, and that's Governor Gavin Newsom right here.
We're seeing unmarked cars in school parking lots, kids afraid of attending their own graduation. Trump is pulling a military dragnet all across Los Angeles, well beyond his stated intent to just go after violent and serious criminals. His agents are arresting dishwashers, gardeners, day laborers, and seamstresses. That's just weakness masquerading as strength. Donald Trump's government isn't protecting our communities. They're traumatizing our communities. And that seems to be the entire point.
Although Donald Trump is probably the person most responsible for spewing fear-mongering bile about immigrants in his administration, Stephen Miller is well known as the architect of Donald Trump's mass deportation plan. And which is the reason that he has been so humiliated as it fails not only to meet its objectives, but also becomes more politically unpopular. And someone who's making sure it will become more politically unpopular is Congressman Robert Garcia, who detailed exactly what he will be doing as chair of the Oversight Committee, the top-ranking Democrat, and going after Stephen Miller. It led to a bit of a meltdown, but first, let's hear from the congressman.
First, I mean, what's happening right now is just, it is so inhumane and gross. And as an immigrant myself who came here as a young kid, it's not the America that so many immigrants come to actually be a part of, to fight for citizenship. The American dream that immigrants are actually drawn to is being ripped away from people. And the inhumanity, essentially dehumanizing immigrants so that they're less than human, is Stephen Miller doing what he loves to do, which is be essentially the biggest piece of shit in this country. Stephen Miller should be ashamed for the way he's acting. I can't even believe he's from our state, which actually makes me more sick.
I think that is an apt description of Stephen Miller, and I am glad, as Robert Garcia and I talked about yesterday, that he is not waiting until we are in the majority to launch these investigations. He is going now, and he is going to hold accountable those who have broken the law in this administration, and clearly Stephen Miller isn't happy about that, because we just saw him completely melt down on Fox over all the judges he is so upset with holding this administration accountable.
It's monumental, Brett. This 6-3 ruling restores American democracy. So President Trump, over the last 5 months, had more nationwide injunctions issued against him than were issued in the 100 years of the 20th century. Most of these nationwide injunctions have come from a small handful of very hard left district court judges in just 4 or 5 cities like Los Angeles, Boston, San Francisco, Chicago. No one in America consented to be ruled by a district court judge in Chicago or Manhattan or Los Angeles or San Francisco. They elected one American president to run the executive branch. Today, the Supreme Court has said President Trump is the one in charge of the executive branch. The Department of Defense, Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security. That is how our democracy works. Every 4 years, we go to the polls and we elect a president. We do not elect a Marxist judge in a far left city to rule over us. And that's what the Supreme Court said today, Brett.
Stephen, might you think that breaking the law is the reason there have been so many injunctions? Do you not think that those things are correlated? That Donald Trump breaks the law more than any other president? So he would face more injunctions than any. Is that not clicking for you? Are you so crowded by the races and just the hate that you have? Doesn't he always look so bad in those suits? That's besides the point. I just think Stephen Miller is poorly dressed. I have to say that. But we did yesterday see that the Supreme Court handed down some favorable rulings for Donald Trump, and we spoke with Jamie Raskin about how we fight back against those, but someone else who detailed how we can make sure that we are pushing back against this administration was Jen Psaki, breaking down those decisions, and I want to take a look.
That's not going so well currently. The thing is he doesn't like the hard work the governing requires because he prefers to rule like a strongman, demanding with a version of a MAGA wand that his orders be carried out by the stroke of a pen. And at this point, he knows he can get away with it because the Republican Party surrendered its power to Donald Trump a very long time ago. And the institution of Congress, another branch of government under Republican control, has surrendered much of its power too. So the only institutional bulwark against Trump's autocratic impulses has been the third branch of government, the courts. And as Trump has pushed the limits of his power, the courts have had to check him over and over and over again, largely the lower courts, issuing nationwide injunctions to halt his executive orders as they decide what authority he actually has under the Constitution. In fact, Trump's actions have been so extreme, the courts have had to use that power to stop him more than any other president in modern history, any other president. And that's something that even Trump himself admits.
We've been hit with more nationwide injunctions than were issued in the entire 20th century together. Think of it, more than the entire 20th century, me.
Yes, you. The courts have had to stop you, Donald Trump, more than any other president. It's not the brag you think it is either, by the way. So that brings us to today, when the conservative majority on the Supreme Court decided that it too would surrender some of its power to Donald Trump. In a 6-3 decision split along ideological lines, the Supreme Court significantly curtailed the power of its own federal courts to stop a lawless president. Now, at the core of the case was one of Trump's most egregious executive orders, his decision to unilaterally end the long-standing precedent that anyone born on U.S. soil is an American citizen. Democratic attorneys general in 22 states, 2 of whom we're going to talk to shortly, sued the Trump administration, saying that order was blatantly unconstitutional. And several federal judges agreed, issuing nationwide injunctions to put that order on pause while the courts considered the case. But the question before the Supreme Court was not whether Trump's effort to end birthright citizenship was itself constitutional. They may consider that in the future. They sort of indicated they might next term. We'll see. Rather, the question before them was whether those judges should even have the power to pause Trump's order across the entire country. Well, today the court's conservative majority effectively said that those lower court judges did not have that power, that they could not pause Trump's order nationwide. They ruled that the pause would only apply to the 22 states that actually sued. It's part of creating the two Americas that we've seen repeatedly. But here's the thing. The court's decision went much further than just the issue of birthright citizenship, which is a very important one, but it went farther than that. They essentially made it much harder for courts to put a nationwide pause on any of Trump's policies. They basically said that the people challenging these orders will have to go state by state, jurisdiction by jurisdiction, to stop any of Trump's unlawful agenda. And there are a whole bunch of Trump's policies, from his federal funding freeze to his new voting restrictions to his attacks on diversity policies, that are currently being blocked by nationwide injunctions. Now, in a chilling dissent, Justice Sonia Sotomayor, writing for the three liberal justices, wrote, "No right is safe in the new legal regime the court creates. Today, the threat is to birthright citizenship. Tomorrow, a different administration may try to seize firearms from law-abiding citizens or prevent people of certain faiths from gathering to worship. The rule of law is not a given in this nation nor any other. It is a precept of our democracy that will endure only if those brave enough in every branch fight for its survival." In every branch, that's a key part. Today, the court abdicates its vital role in that effort. In a separate concurring dissent, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson made it crystal clear what this ruling will mean in the very near term. Here's what she had to say. "What it means to have a system of government that is bounded by law is that everyone is constrained by the law, no exceptions. And for that to actually happen, courts must have the power to order everyone, including the executive, to follow the law, full stop. To conclude otherwise is to endorse the creation of a zone of lawlessness within which the executive has the prerogative to take or leave the law as it wishes, and where individuals who would otherwise be entitled to the law's protection become subject to the executive's whims instead." As sobering as those dissents are, and they're very sobering, and there's more, the truth is that we have always known how Donald Trump thinks about power and his power. We have long known what the court's conservative majority thinks about their role in constraining him. After all, this court did grant him broad immunity from prosecution just a year ago. The big question, one of them, is what happens next? Well, this decision significantly hamstrings the federal courts. It did not entirely shut the door on their ability to block Trump's agenda. We're going to dig into that specifically. Plaintiffs can ask a court to award preliminary class-wide relief that may, for example, be statewide, region-wide, or even nationwide. In his concurring opinion, Justice Kavanaugh leaves the door open for people to bring cases as a large group or a class and get courts to issue rulings that apply to every member of that group nationwide. In other words, people can still ask the courts to block Trump's policies across the entire country if they can manage to do the hard organizing work of finding big groups of people who will be negatively impacted by them and getting them to come out. And if there's one thing we've learned in the second Trump administration, the 6 months of it that we're into here, it's that people standing up to Trump know how to do that kind of dedicated on-the-ground organizing all across the country, in every state nearly. We've seen them do it in protests everywhere. We've seen them do it in courthouses where ICE agents try to round up immigrants who are just showing up for their immigration hearings. We've seen them do it at town halls in deep red Republican districts. It is possible that we will look back on today's ruling as the day when the fight against Trump in the courts and the fight against Trump in the streets became one and the same. And I am not saying it's going to be easy. It's going to be hard. But we always knew this was going to be hard.
We have shown that we have agency, that we can fight back, that we can disrupt, that we can stop this administration. And it is upon us to continue to do so. And of course, we are going to be talking about ways that we can do so and uplifting those who are on this show every single day. Thanks for watching this video. And if you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.